You guys being Amigo pet food, is there any like unique or any special superfoods that you guys use? Be like, okay, this is what we stand for at Amigo Pet Food.
So the idea of superfood, for me, is a little bit uncomfortable. I'll tell you why. Because everybody wants the silver bullet, right? You want the one pill that you're going to have to take for breakfast once a day, and that's going to solve all your problem. But unfortunately, life doesn't work like this.
Yeah.
You've got to put the hard work. and it's the same with nutrition, you know. You can take whatever superfood, or you can give your dog whatever superfood you want, but if your dog is eating junk and anything that's not good for him the rest of the time, that superfood is going to do very little. So the baseline of nutrition is super important. So what is the quality of the baseline, and is it in adequacy with the requirement of your dog? Is your dog active? Is your dog not active? Is your dog young, puppy, large breed, small breed, older, stressed, history? For instance, we see a lot of dogs with history as puppies, rescued dogs that have a very traumatic experience or life during puppyhood, and they are scarred for life from a digestive perspective. Often they do not recover. Their genetics has expressed itself in a way that is scarred, and they have become unable to digest certain foods, certain nutrients. They have become less effective, and there's only so much you can do. You cannot recover something that happened sometimes during the first 2-3 months of life, even if it's 5-6 years later. So never mind superfood, the baseline is super important. Once the baseline is good, of course there are some ingredients, some top-ups that are very important and are very well documented for having beneficial effect on health. It's a little bit like spices for me. You know, it's what's going to make the dish stand out, but the quality of the ingredients, the quality of the recipe, it's not the spices that are going to cover up for everything. If the dish is not good, if the ingredients that you selected are not good, I'm talking about human nutrition now.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can put the spices you want, it's not going to be good. You know?
Just going to be tasty.
Yeah, or not. You know, there's only so much you can save with spices. So they're important, but they're not. It's like the whole picture that is really important.
Yeah.
So in terms of superfoods, you want to. I think variety is good. So there's a trend in pet food which is called humanization, which is very important, and I think we're going to see this for many years to come. It is the trend that makes pet owners want to feed their dog what they think is good for them. Okay, so there's a lot of talks about algae, for instance, in human nutrition, how good it is. Then people have a natural tendency to think, okay, if it's good for me, algae, I want to feed algae to my dog as well. So I'm just using algae as an example. In principle, for me, it's important to, as a nutritionist, to detach myself from the emotional aspect of an ingredient. Okay, if it's, I'll give a stupid example, maybe, but let's say I'm a surfer and I love the ocean, and then for me algae is going to be super emotional because that's where I belong, and that's where is it good for my dog just because I like surfing? I'm not sure. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to detach myself from this by saying, okay, what is it in terms of macronutrients, micronutrients, potential contaminant that I want or that I do not want in that superfood? And is there a risk at the level of inclusion that I want to use in the diet? So let's use algae. So not a bad example actually. Algae bring some algae bring fibers. Fibers good. Fibers feeds the microbiome because dogs can't digest fibers really. They bring minerals as well. In some cases, it can be interesting. Some algae bring a lot of omega-3s, so it can be interesting as well. But some algae, they work as filters. The way they grow in the ocean is they filter a lot of the ocean water, and the nutrients that they retain from filtering these millions of tons of water is allowing them to grow. But by filtering this, depending on when they grow, where they are grown, they're also filtering contaminants that you find in the ocean. Heavy metals, potentially, bacteria, potentially. So you've got to be mindful of what is the bigger picture. And also, if you add 1 gram of algae to your dog's diet every day, it's not the same risk than if you add a kilo of algae. Don't react on the quantity, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
If it's something that has a risk, it's not the same risk at 1 gram per day or at 100 grams a day. The risk is 100-fold. So yeah. Overall, I'd like to give you a bit more of a precise answer. For me, sources of omega-3 are very important for dogs.
True.
We talk about essential fatty acids. Omega-3 is omega-6, okay? But they're not the same. Omega-6 are everywhere. In everywhere there's fat, there's a lot of omega-6. I can guarantee you it's very difficult to get a dog deficient in omega-6. Although it's essential, so dogs can't metabolize omega-6s themselves. They need to acquire it from nutrition. It's very difficult to get short of omega-6. Okay? So you see this advertised on a lot of pet food bags, but in fact it's like saying today we've got free air, free oxygen, courtesy of Amigo pet food.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a marketing gimmick. So and further than this, above a certain level, they actually become problematic because they are pro-inflammatory. So dogs have metabolisms that are very fast. Okay? In other words, it's like a little engine that spins very fast compared to us, where our engine spins a lot less fast. So yes, it performs, it uses nutrients, but it also emits fumes. Okay? And these fumes, the body has to get rid of them. And some of these byproducts of the metabolism, those fumes that I'm talking about, they are called free radicals. Okay? So free radicals, they are compounds or molecules that have oxidative effect on the cells. So they damage the cell walls, they can damage the DNA of the dog's cells and so on. So the dogs have to get rid of them as effectively as possible and as efficiently as possible. So there's a lot of macronutrients that contribute to the neutralization of free radicals. Some vitamins, vitamin E, for instance, vitamin C, but also omega-3s. So coming back to my omega-6, omega-3 story, omega-6s, they are abundant in many sources of fat, so it's more difficult to try to avoid them or to restrict them than not to. Okay? And when they are in excess, they create a pro-inflammatory environment in the dog's body. In other words, the dogs become very good at creating inflammation. Okay. Inflammation is very important. So when there is a damage in a particular tissue, let's say the dog hurts his shoulder or bumps his leg somewhere, it swells up, that's inflammation, and it's basically the immunity saying, okay, work in progress. Okay? We're busy fixing this area, and the immune system fixes what needs to be fixed. And to start the inflammation process, the local area that needs to be fixed sends signal to the brain of the dog, and those signals, they are based on omega-6's molecule. Okay? So it's a little bit like roadworks, work in progress, and you're advertising with a megaphone. Okay? That's the role of omega-6. So now you can imagine if there's too much omega-6s, and we are having a conversation and I'm speaking to you with a megaphone, it's a little bit overwhelming for you. Okay, so that's the risk of omega-6s. Pro-inflammatory. If there's too much signal, potentially advertising inflammation. And the other way around, omega-3s, they are anti-inflammatory. So when the job is done, the dog's metabolism needs to resolve inflammation. So it needs to say, okay, end of the roadworks, we can open the highway again. And omega-3s, they play a role in that sense, in telling the brain, okay, this is now done. You can just tune down the immune response. Omega-3s, they are a lot more difficult to source in the world of ingredients than omega-6s. So what you want to manage is the level of the both and the ratio between the two. So to come back to your, sorry, I always make like my answers like 2 hours long, but I'm trying not to lose the question. For me, a variety of omega-3s is very interesting. Omega-3s of marine origin, very interesting. Of plant origin, a little bit less interesting, because the type of omega-3s that you find in plant fats, like linseeds, are not so usable by dogs. They can only convert these omega-3s into the ones that are important, EPA and DHA, which are essentially of animal origin, at a certain rate. So if you feed hemp oil or linseed oil to dogs, it has a lot of omega-3s, but it's not the type of omega-3s that the dogs actually need. They need to convert them through an enzymatic process into EPA and DHA. You've heard about EPA and DHA? Maybe?
I've heard of DHA.
So fats are, if let's say fat is a page of text. In detail, you would have letters that make up these words and these sentences. Okay. Not all letters have the same usage or the same role. There are letters in the alphabet that are more important than others. Okay. For instance, if I ask you to make a sentence without using X or Z, it's going to be quite manageable, right?
Yeah.
If I ask you to make a sentence without using an E or A, it's a bit problematic. So the E and the A, they are the essential fatty acids. They're the letters that make up the fat that are more important than others, because the dogs can't make their own. So that's why it's important to zoom in at the fatty acid level, which are the letters level, and see what the text is actually made of.
That does answer my question.
So in animals, it's also not saying that it's important to understand that not all sources of animal fat are good. Farm animals, poultry, cattle, and pigs, they are eating essentially maize and soya, which contributes to maize, soya, sunflower, that contributes to making up their own fat. So they're acquiring the same kind of profile in terms of the composition of fatty acids of the fat that they're eating. We are what we eat, right? So it's true for animals as well.
True.
So if they are being grown and farmed for short term. They're being slaughtered after so many months or so many weeks. And the quality of the composition of their fat is not as important as it is for pets who want to live a long and healthy life. So when you are feeding your pets with poultry fat, with pork fat, or with cattle fat, it is largely excedentary in omega-6s, so very pro-inflammatory, and largely deficient in omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory. So it's a problem. Okay. So it's not only about, back to my baseline story, it's not only about finding a good source of omega-3s to top up a bad diet with, it's also about managing the baseline initially. I'll give you an example with what we do. We use ostrich oil exclusively as a source of fat in our Amigo diet. Okay? And ostrich oil is very healthy in terms of the omega-3 to 6 ratio. It's got a ratio of 1 to 3. So every 1 3, you have 3 omega-6 corresponding. So it's very low. Poultry oil, it's 1 to 50. So there's 50 times more omega-6 than omega-3s.
Sure.
So it's 20 times more than ostrich oil. And for that reason, ostrich oil is anti-inflammatory and has a great level of omega-3s that contributes to all the benefits that we... So when you add a superfood, yes, it's important to add it in the baseline because then it replaces something that you actually want out. Okay, and if I can give you another example of, you just stop me if I'm going too much. Or, I warned you.
Your turn.
I should have signed a disclaimer.
Yes.
For instance, sorghum. Okay. So sorghum, the reason why we use sorghum is because it's highly digestible. Okay, it does not contain gluten, and it, from a macronutrients perspective, it's very interesting. It contains tannins that are called polyphenols. Okay, so you know what sorghum looks like as a seed or as a grain? It's a little bit. If you buy bird seeds, it's the little red specks in the bird seed mix, and that red color is made by polyphenols. So it's molecules that have a very, very strong antioxidative effect. So it's a strong antioxidant. And that's one of the reasons why we use sorghum, is because on top of the macronutrients, the protein, the energy, and so on, it also brings those antioxidants that are good in neutralizing or important in neutralizing free radicals, the fumes that I was talking about. So I'm linking up to the beginning of my story. So a superfood is not only something that you're going to add and top up, it's something that you can include because sorghum in proportion is going to represent an important level of percentage of the whole food, and then you've got a bigger chance of actually getting the effect that you want. If you top up something with a sprinkle, it only has so much effect because nutrition is also about volume.
And for people that are using a raw diet or they're cooking their pet food at home, how can they then incorporate this? But before I answer the question, where is your stance in terms of like raw food and home cooked meals for pets?
So I'm going to answer as a scientist, as a nutritionist, as objectively as possible. Okay. And in fact, actually, the beginning of last year, I did a presentation at the World Veterinary Association Congress, which took place in Cape Town last year, on the topic, comparing kibbles versus raw. And of course, I'm for a lot of people who believe in raw and swear by raw, I'm seen as the defender of kibbles because I work for a company that makes kibbles. Okay? But from a scientific perspective, I'd like to believe that I can be objective enough. And the nature of my work was to draw from the literature, from the scientific literature, what I mentioned before, peer-reviewed articles. Not only because there's very few publications about raw food, actually. Most of it is about kibbles. So I had to also draw from books that were published by people advocating raw. There's pros and cons in everything. First of all, I would say that it's important to understand the differences between the two concepts. Okay, it's not only nutrition against nutrition. It's the same as I was talking about before. What else are we bringing into the diets that potentially is a risk for the dogs, but also for the family? Okay. If you look at what people advocate when they're talking about raw or when they're talking about kibbles, it's very reductive to say on one side it's raw and one side is kibble. What is a kibble? Between the cheapest kibbles you can buy in South Africa and the most expensive kibbles you can buy in South Africa, there's a huge amount of difference. Between the cheapest raw food you can buy and the most expensive raw food you can buy, there's a huge amount of difference. And are we comparing bottom of one scenario with the top of one scenario, or vice versa, or an average? Or then it's difficult to make an answer that covers all. It's like, what is better? What is more expensive, a bike or a motorbike or a car? You know? Or what is better, a bike or a car? It depends what you want to do. It depends what's your budget. You know, you can buy a very expensive motorbike. You can buy a very cheap car. It's going to perform differently. So I'm still going to answer, but I think it's important to understand. What is also important to understand, and I think it's where a lot of the misunderstanding are coming from when it comes to raw and kibbles, is the individuals that we are feeding. Okay. We are feeding pets. We are feeding dogs. Dogs are not species that you find naturally occurring in the wild. There are wild dogs, but they're not related to our dogs so closely. The dogs of today, they are the fruit of a genetic selection that has happened over the last 20,000 years, where we basically imposed life parameters and life constraints to dogs that were coming from the wild. Okay. In other words, we made our dogs adapt to our lifestyle, which includes being with us, being friendly with us, and which includes nutrition. The first animals that were the ancestors of the wolf of today, which were taken from the wild, which eventually ended up becoming the dogs that we know today. They were not adapted to eating bread and being with us in a peaceful way and so on. So we selected them, and we didn't keep the ones that were aggressive. We didn't keep the ones that were struggling on leftovers of our own diet. They were eliminated by way of selection, and eventually we changed the genome of the species that we know today as dogs compared to what it was 20,000 years ago. And how did we change it? And it's something that is very well documented in the scientific literature. We changed it in mostly two areas of the genome, of the DNA of those animals. The brain, because of domestication. So domestication is eliminating traits and genetic traits that have aggression, unfriendliness, impossibility of training with humans. So if you compare genetically the makeup of a dog of today, of dogs of today, and their closest ancestors, their closest relative, which are the grey wolves, they are cousins. They're not dogs. Don't descend from grey wolves. They are cousins, but they are close relative. If you compare this, the first area of differences genetically is the brain, okay, because of domestication. The second area of differences is the digestive tract. So the digestive tract of a dog has adapted or has been forced to adapt to our diet. So there are commonalities or common parts with the grey wolves, but there are also big differences. One of the big differences is that dogs have multiple copies of genes to be able to code for amylase. Amylase is the enzyme that breaks down starch. So my point is to say that a dog of today needs to eat like a wild animal is a big mistake because it's not true. It's not true. From a genetic perspective, we have modified dogs from their wolves ancestors so that they are able to cope with this. Having said this, they also need protein. They do well on animal protein and so on. So it's very important to understand this, because if you're trying to feed, and sometimes, you know, the discussion is, does a wolf eat, I've seen this in books and articles, does a wolf eat plants? Okay. And so some authors says yes, they eat the content of the rumen of the large mammals that they take down. First of all, it's very controversial. I've seen specialists in this field saying no, they don't. But secondly, I think it's going a bit too far off the topic. The topic is what is the requirement of a dog, and we're talking about a dog, not a wolf. And no matter how strongly A lot of people want to believe that the Chihuahua is a wolf and the cat is a tiger. The reality is that the nutritional requirements have
Very
evolved.
different.
Yeah. Then there's a question of adequacy in terms of nutrients, okay, and practicality. There's something that is very pro Kibbles in terms of argument is how practical it is. You buy a bag of dog food, you store it in your cupboard, and then you feed a little bit every day until it's finished. And it's fitting our lifestyle very well because that's how we work with our own food. We don't only buy fresh food every day. You also have food in your cupboard that has a 2 years shelf life. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it's the way we live. And on the other side, if you want to feed something raw and fresh to your dogs every day, it's logistics constraints. Okay, some people are willing to do this. The big advantage of raw is that it's very palatable. For dogs like us, they prefer something fresh than something dehydrated.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you offer them both, most dogs will go for raw. The problem with another issue with raw versus kibbles is the level of nutrition and the consistency of the delivery of nutrients through raw. Raw is mostly water. Okay, kibbles are less than 10% water content. Raw is between 75 and 85% water. Okay, so what it means is your actual nutrition is condensed into 15-25%. So if the water content moves up and down, your nutrition moves up and down to a huge extent. So let's say it's a little bit technical.
Okay.
But let's say a 5% variation in water content is going to compress your actual nutrition from 20 to 15%. We're talking about a quarter difference. So a little bit of water variation in your raw product is going to have a huge variability on the actual level of nutrition. And it is very difficult from a nutritional perspective to compound raw ingredients to make a balanced diet systematically. So if you read peer-reviewed articles that have been published on the topic, comparing consistency of nutrition with raw food, it goes all over the shop. It's very simple. From way below the recommended minimum requirements by American or European organizations to 10 times more the recommended nutritional levels on protein, on fat, on etc. And if it's only raw from animals, there's no fiber. And the beneficial effect of fiber is very important for dogs. And the last part is it's something that it's a risk that you can have in kibbles and in raw, but more in raw because of the moisture content, bacteria. So typically Salmonella, E. coli, which are pathogenic bacteria. So in other words, they can be harmful not only for the dogs, but for the dog's close environment. So if your dog is sick, or if your dog, let's say your dog eats something that contains Salmonella, maybe your dog will be 100% fine. Maybe not, but it will be. There's a chance that you will just do fine. You will not even notice. But your dog is going to shed, in other words, produce Salmonella and disperse it in your environment, in your house. And if you have a baby, or if your grandmother lives with you, when she gets Salmonella or when your baby gets Salmonella, they will not do as well as your dog. So potentially, you're introducing bacterial risk through the dog as a vector, and it's not such a risk for the dog, but it's a risk for
the family.
And that is a lot more with raw, because raw is coming from abattoir byproducts. Okay, so it's whatever is not ending on the supermarket shelves that is being chopped up and put together, and usually it's contaminated with bacteria quite heavily. Even in I would say markets that are more sophisticated than South Africa, the level of bacterial contamination, Salmonella, E. coli, but also those strains showing high level of antibiotic resistance is all over the show in all the literature. And you can, when I did that scientific review, I had to decide, okay, I've got enough articles, because the more you look, the more you get. It's like super well documented because it's very simple. You take a sample, you send it to a lab, and then you get your results, and the risk is bigger with raw. There's also issues with kibbles, don't get me wrong, because kibbles also use animal product that potentially contains those bacteria, but the processing, and particularly the cooking, is quite a lot safer, where with raw you don't have cooking. So it's a trade-off. If palatability is on top of your list, if you don't mind handling the raw nature of product, and you're not worried about salmonella and the bacteriological risk, or if you want something more convenient, which I think you can also get high quality of. So it's not a simple answer. This is better or this is better. You get me?
Makes sense.
And I certainly don't want to say raw is all bad or kibbles are all bad. But it's important to be mindful and understand the pros and cons of both. And